Welcome to Bristol Bay Native Corporation's podcast series, Mug Up with BBNC. Mug Up is a term commonly used in the Bristol Bay region, specifically in the fishing community. It refers to getting together with friends and family for a casual gathering over a warm cup of coffee or tea. It's all about sharing stories, experiences, and connecting with one another. In this podcast, hosted by BBNC's communications team, you'll hear from BBNC employees, community leaders, and passionate individuals who are engaged in BBNC's mission of enriching our Native way of life. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Mug Up with BBNC, our next podcast episode. You have Kayla Wilson here, BBNC's communications manager, and you also have Carmel Ingebretson here. Do you want to say hi, Carmel?
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we have a special episode that we're going to do for Halloween. We have a few spooky stories that we're going to have Sophie Ann Woods tell. She's an elder from Dillingham. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, everyone.
So good to have you. Do you want to do an introduction of yourself?
Okay. My name is Sophie Woods. I'm originally from Clark's Point, Alaska, and probably about 50 or more years ago, I moved to Dillingham with my husband, and I've been here since. And I'm a retired teacher aide of 50 years from the Dillingham Elementary School. I have 3 living sons, and they all live here in Dillingham. A bunch of grandkids and great-grandkids. And I've taught Native dancing, storytelling, and name-giving for over 20 years at the school, and I'm still doing that.
That's so cool.
In a smaller scale, but still doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm 80, so
80 years young. Awesome.
That's my life.
Yeah. So, okay, Sophie and I were talking last week on the phone, and Sophie, you mentioned that you still teach storytelling to kids.
I do. In fact, I just came back at 1 o'clock from the high school.
Yeah.
6th graders.
Yeah. When we were talking, you had talked about like how important storytelling is. And even if you're just, for example, going for a walk at lunchtime, that's a story.
Everything that happened yesterday or day before yesterday or last year or what you heard or what you see is a story. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be scary or anything. It's just life.
Mm-hmm.
Every single thing you do is a story. It's history. If you go out and take a walk, that's a story. You could just tell what you did. Mm-hmm. Or something silly or something scary. It's not all about what happened a long time ago. It's our life that we live every day.
Yeah, so we just thought, since Halloween's coming up, we thought maybe we could have a special episode on a few scary stories. So do you have, I know you have some because we talked about them, but which one do you want to start with?
I will talk about, this is a story about an Indian woman that was captured by her Eskimo husband, and she was married to him, so she had a tiny baby and a little 2-year-old, but it was her husband left her in his village because he went to war. He went to war to fight the Indians. and the village was starving. So she decided to take her two kids, and she knew that her village was over the mountain. So she started walking with her 2-year-old and her baby, and she didn't have any food because the village was starving. So she just decided to just see how far she could go. The longer she walked, it got worse and worse. Her mukluk started getting, wearing out, and her feet were bleeding. Her little boy was crying because he was tired, and the baby was crying too because she didn't have any milk. It was getting dark, so she decided, because she was almost at the top of the mountain, she said, I'll just go to the top and rest for a while. And so she made it to the top with her baby and her little boy. While she sat down to rest, she could hear far away, and she knew it was a howl of a wolf. And she got so scared, and her baby knew that she was scared, so he started crying, and her little boy just was sleeping, the 2-year-old. So she didn't know what to do, and she thought, he's going to eat all of us. He's going to kill all of us. I might as well just try to save my one older child because he can walk, and I can carry him a little bit and maybe get away. She made a little nest out of grass and put the baby in it and left him on the mountain. And she started walking off, and she could hear the baby crying, and then, it made her feel so hurting inside, but she knew she had to do that. She just kept on going. It was a calm night, and the moon was coming up, and as she walked away down the mountain, she could hear the baby crying, and then she couldn't hear the baby anymore, and she knew that the wolf had gotten the baby.
Oh, that's so sad.
And it is, and it's a lot of these stories are morbid and sad, teaching a moral, I think, or something. I don't know, but anyway, she heard the screams of her baby until she could hear the wolf growling because it was calm. She could hear the wolf growling and eating and tearing something up. And she hurt real hard, but she knew she had to go on. Well, she kept on walking, and she could see far in the distance where she could see an abandoned qazyak. And a qazyak is a mud hut, a mud house with a window on the top. It has an entrance on the side. And so she got close to it. She went in. It was abandoned. So there were 2 beds along each side of the wall, and the moon was shining in on one of the walls. So she found the bed that was on the dark side where the moon wasn't shining on it. So she put her little boy down, and he went right to sleep. And she heard from a long distance crunching in the snow, like someone was walking on the snow. She could hear it from the cabin. She covered the little boy's mouth with her hand in case he might cry out. And she thought maybe it would pass by. But it didn't. She heard jumping on the khazliq, and then pattering of foot, and then pretty soon the smoke hole, which was covered by a sealskin, opened up. And she saw someone. There was something leaning, and she could hear it sniffing, and she thought, if I could just be really quiet, he will go away. She finally got up enough nerve to look at it, and he was looking down, but he couldn't see her. But she saw that it was a wolf, but it had lots of long hair covering its face. And as she watched, he grabbed a hold of his hair and lifted it up, and she could see that it had the face of a man. He was a wolf man. He was a man with a wolf with a man's face. He had paws like a wolf, because he started licking them and waiting, because he could smell something down there. Just biding his time and waiting to get them. She decided to save herself, and she left her little boy there and quietly went to the door and slipped out. As soon as she got to the door, she ran as fast as she could. And then she heard her little boy screaming, and then pretty soon nothing. And she knew that the wolf had gotten him, and she could hear snarling and growling, but then pretty soon nothing even after that. She kept running, and she could hear him behind her. And she could feel him panting, his breath behind her, his hot breath on her. She looked back, and he was running like a wolf, but she could see he had a man's face. Afar away, she saw a big tree. It wasn't a spruce tree because it had branches on it. She thought she saw a man standing there, or this tree turned into a man. He opened his coat and held out his arms to her, saying, "Come." She went into his arms, and he closed his arms, and she doesn't remember anything after that. When she woke up, it was daylight, and she was laying outside of a big old tree, and there was nothing wrong with her, but she didn't have her kids. She couldn't remember if it was all a bad dream or if it really happened. She walked back to the cabin, and she found her little boy's bones. And she walked back up it was sad.
Yeah.
She went back up the mountain, and all she saw were her baby's bones. And she thought, what good is it for me to go back to my people? I have nothing. So she went back to the village of her husband, but when she got there, she found they had all died from starvation. The whole village was burned because the Indians had come and burned it. Even the dogs were dead. And I don't know how the story ended, but I made my own ending.
Oh, what is it?
So she took her knife and stabbed it into her breast and she died.
Oh my goodness.
The kids always just look at me like, boy, you're crazy.
Wow.
So your mom...
Because the only one that understood. My mom was Peggy Anderson.
And she told the story to you.
Yeah, and she told it while she was knitting, but you know what? She told it in Yupik. And I'm the only one that understands Yupik.
And who did your mom hear it from?
She didn't say, and I didn't think to ask her.
Mm-hmm. Is it a real story, or is it made up, you think?
I think it's probably a tale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's scary.
So,
do you know if there's any other stories about a wolf man? You know how there's stories about the big hairy man and little men that multiple people have? Do you think there's other stories about the wolf man?
there are stories about humans that turn to what they call eerie. Eerie is a person that goes out into the wild, and these eerie, some way take their liver out of them, and they become a eerie. I know mommies talk about eerie, but she never did explain it. But I read a story once about from the Kuskokwim, and we're all related through that area, the Kuskokwim, and all along the coast, you know, they intermarry and everything. And so, anyway, it's a story from the Kuskokwim about Yuilriks. They could take you. I could remember a story about my mom telling us, if a Yuilrik ever takes, it's hard to say, you know, Yuilrik. But she'd say, if a Yuilrik ever takes you, all you have to do is say salt in any language. And I thought to myself, I only know salt and Yupik. I'll just say it in English. And then of course, never did take me, so.
So these are like half animal, half human people.
No, these Yuriks are just people that get lost and they get taken. A hairy man used to be human before. They got lost and they grew hair.
The hairy man, I've heard, is like lives out in the wilderness, is really tall and really hairy and scary. Is that true?
And, you know, we don't say Sasquatch. We say hairy man. And I could remember my mom told me a man trapped a hairy man. Trapped him, made him under the ground, you know, and the hairy man went. It was a trap, you know, under the ground, and put something over he dug a pit, and that it fell in there. That hairy man fell in there, and couldn't get out. So he would feed it, give it water, food, and the hair slowly came off. It was a woman, and he ended up marrying her.
What?
Oh, wow.
Plot twist.
And she said it was related to, this woman was related to a man that lived at Ecock.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
I know, and his name was Sakhali Palagan.
And
I
he's
don't
the one
know
that
if it's
married the woman.
No,
Oh.
one either his dad or his grandpa or whatever, in some kind of she said that he was related to the guy that trapped the hairy man.
Wow.
Yeah. There's one story that this old lady from upriver told my aunt a story about this. It's a true story, and I have to see if my uncle Carl will remember that lady that told the story. But she said that every year they would go down to here in Dillingham and live in there was a tent village where the boat harbor is now, where the boat yard is now in the boat harbor. It was a big tent village there. And they'd stay all summer. Some would fish and some would work in the cannery. And then they would take, in the fall, they would get their grub and go back up the river and, with their boats. And they started late. And I don't know if the tide goes out or in up there, but they stopped and they stayed overnight against the side of the river. And they had a 2-year-old. They had lots of kids, and their youngest was a 2-year-old. And when they woke up in the morning, they had a boat, probably a wooden boat, this was a long time ago. And when they woke up, the little boy wasn't there. And they saw his footprints. He jumped off, and then pretty soon they couldn't track him anymore. And they gave up on him. Years went by. Many, many years went by. It was really cold outside. And the mom and dad of this little boy were alone in the house in the winter. And I don't know which village they were from, because there's New Stuyahawk, Ekwok, New Stuyahawk, and Kaliganek. And he made coffee, and he was sitting at the table. The table was by the door, and he was on the other side of the table. And then the door opened, and he was having coffee, and the door opened, and this big, tall, hairy man came in. He got so scared, he just sat there and looked. That hairy man looked at him and just said, "Daddy," and turned around and left.
Oh my gosh.
And that's a true story.
Whoa.
I know. Sad.
That's really sad.
Mm-hmm. And they see sightings around here of big, tall things. They can't tell from the airplane if they're full of hair or not, but like John Paul Volcker a long time ago between Togiak and Dillingham, he saw something with a blue tarp wrapped around it. running and was real tall looking. And then someone else up at Lewis Point saw same thing. They'd lose bacon and because they put their food outside, cooler outside. And they put a gas can, nail it up on the wall and outside, and food would be taken. And someone saw somebody running away with the blue tarp around it. And there's lots of people that have gotten lost or supposedly drowned and never did find them.
Are they known to hurt people or just kind of wander around and be scary? Or what are they known for?
They never did hurt people.
Okay. So they were just lost.
A lot of sightings have been down at Clark's lately.
Ooh.
In the last 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Carmel, your grandpa Morris and Pauline, this was, I don't know how many years ago. They were outside smoking. And then they saw something jump down from somewhere high, I don't know where. And they both looked at each other and they said, it was a hairy man. They saw a hairy man. And then Pauline told me about 4 or 5 years ago, there's a white hairy man with a little baby hairy man.
Oh, wow.
Down there. An albino.
Wow.
There was a sighting here. This kid must be... Do you know Adanya? Adanya Gardner?
Oh, yeah, LaDanya. She's my cousin.
LaDanya.
Uh-huh.
Her first boyfriend was, what was his name? Alvarado. Anyway, he was like a teenager. LaDonya's daughter is his kid. Anyway, he was just a teenager, and he lived with his grandma up the lake road, and they closed at 7:00, and there was this guy from one of the they have those fish camps up the lake, and this guy was shopping, and he knew that this Alvarado kid needed a ride, so he said, I'll wait for you. Then I could drop you off at your house, because they live in 9 Mile or somewhere way up there. And so he said, yeah. And they were both walking to the van, and that kid looked over toward, now they have it was a gravel pit, and since they're redoing Nurka Road, they put a whole bunch of dirt on, they covered up the gravel pit. But it was a gravel pit then, and there was a young birch tree about 8 or 9 feet tall, young one, and right standing next to it was a hairy man. And he looked over at the guy that was giving him a ride, and he said, they both looked at each other, and they both said to each other, you saw that? And they looked over, and that thing was looking at them. It had the longest arms. And it was looking at them, and it swung its head and swung its body, and in no time at all, it was around the curve of the hill and gone.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So
and
they're
now
fast.
it's overgrown.
Hmm. Do you know any stories about little people?
Well, this is another true story, and Casey's grandma and great grandma
Mm-hmm.
used to fish together down at Clark's Point. Pipsy was her name. Her real name was Mary Shade.
Mm-hmm.
And then she got married to a Luckhurst after that. But then she had, her kids were small. She was married to Herman Shade. And her mom had a fitness site. And they lived at the bottom of the bluff where there was a little lake. And the dad, Herman Shade, had made a tin boat for, Pipsy had twins. Her first kids were twins,
Mm-hmm.
Lydia and Herman. And they were probably about 4 or 5. And they had to go and check the net. They were probably about a quarter of a mile or less away from the beach. So they just left the kids there. It was early in the morning. They went down to the fitness site. And one of those twins heard loud, well, probably Herman Jr. We call him Boy. He lives in Dillingham. He heard loud bang against the wall. And by the way, Pipsy told me the story. Casey's grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And so he woke up his twin sister. They went to the window, and there was a couch there against the window, and they had a big picture window. And there was a little tiny man and a little tiny woman. And they had a crawl space under their house, and that little tiny man was trying to push his Herman Shade Sr. had made a tin boat for Herman Jr. I'll call him Boy.
Mm-hmm.
So that there is a difference between the dad and the son. Anyway, Boy made a tin boat, probably about 2 gas cans wide, probably about 5 feet or 4 feet. And he'd go in that little tin boat and go around that lake that was in front of their house. And he was very proud of that tin boat. And that little old man was trying to push it sideways into the crawl space. And that little old woman was saying, "You can't do it that way." And they were arguing. And all of a sudden, the man looked up toward the window. And they both ducked down, and they were really scared. They were little, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "What if they come in?" So they made sure the door was locked. And then pretty soon there was nothing more, and they peeked. That tin boat was really dented dented in half. He was trying to put it sideways into the door instead of lengthwise,
Mm.
And the crawl space, into the crawl space. Well, here comes the mom and the grandma, Pipsy and Lydia, Mrs. Gardner, and they told their grandma and mom right away about that. And they didn't believe them, and they said, "Look out there, look at the tin boat." And sure enough, it was, dented really bad. I think somebody had tried to push it sideways into the house, and they believed them, and they blocked up the crawl space. They nailed it shut. So that's the real story.
Ooh. So when we talk about little men, for those people that don't, little people, how little are we talking? Are we talking like 2 inches? Are we talking about like 2 feet? Like how little are they?
Probably about maybe 2 feet.
2 feet. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a story. Carmel?
Mm-hmm.
Carmel, did you ever go to Clark's?
Yeah, we used to spend our summers over in Clark's.
Okay. Do you remember walking down the beach and seeing that grassy spot? One part of the bluff is all grass. Okay, there's a story about that. There were a lot of little men a long time ago that bothered people, killed dogs. But they didn't bother. They bothered people, they stole and all that stuff, but they didn't kill them or anything, but they killed dogs.
Did they eat them?
I think they ate them.
Oh, jeez.
And anyway, this medicine man told people, that he would lure them away from the village. And I when I think about it, the way my mom told it, he lured them down to that place, but there must have been a cave there. So they all went in. And after they all went in, he was outside of that, probably a cave. And what he did was he turned the hill around.
Oh.
He turned the hill around to where they couldn't get out.
Oh.
Like a stone door, how they could just turn. Well, he turned the hill around. And then one time we were picking berries, and my mom we were going up the hill, and my mom was going up the hill. That's when she told the story. My mom was going up the hill, and she said, "Oh, there's cracks here now." I said, "Cracks? What cracks?" So there would be grass, and there would be like pieces of turf fallen off, and you could see the mud. And she said, "There's cracks here. I hope that the little men aren't coming out."
Oh.
So that's the story behind Tulukahuya.
Huh. Wow.
Do we know how the little men came to be? Little people. I keep saying little men. Little people.
That's what we call them.
Yeah.
Little men.
Yeah.
They're called, the Yupik way, they're called Sinsia.
And how do we know how they started? Or have they just always been?
No. They never did. They must. My mom must have assumed she never did talk about that. Neither did my little Auntie Mary or Hannah Sorensen or any others that used to tell stories about little people.
Well, thank you, Sophie, for talking to us and our followers about some scary stories.
Welcome.
We appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Yeah, it was so nice chatting with you, Sophie.
I had a very good day today. I told
good.
stories more than once.
Oh, good. All right, Sophie, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll
thank
talk
you
to
very
you
much
later.
for listening to little old me.
Anytime. I love listening to all your stories.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Sophie.
Bye.
Bye.
You're welcome. Okay. Bye.
All right, that concludes our spooky podcast just in time for Halloween. We hope you enjoyed listening to the spooky stories from Sophie Woods, and we wish you a spooky Halloween.
Ooh. Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
We are the shareholders of Bristol Bay Native Corporation. We each have stories to tell, histories to make, and gifts to give. Each of us unique, sharing our strengths toward a single shared purpose, to steward our region and our native way of life. We are the shareholders of Bristol Bay Native Corporation, but we share so much more than a corporation.